closely at your reflection tonight. Not for a second, not for a photograph, really look. Because hidden behind the familiar face staring back at you, one of the strangest mysteries science has ever uncovered. A mystery that raises an unsettling question. Who else might be looking through your eyes? For generations, most people were taught a simple version of human history, a story that seemed neat, orderly, easy to understand. The story went something like this. Long ago, primitive ancestors slowly evolved into more advanced forms. One species replaced another, step by step, generation by generation, until eventually modern humans appeared. Us, the final chapter, the sole survivors, the end of the story. But over the last few decades, scientists have discovered something extraordinary. The story was never that simple, and it may never have had a clear ending at all. To understand why, we first need to understand what DNA actually is. Every living thing on Earth contains a biological instruction manual. That instruction manual is called DNA. Inside nearly every cell of your body is a copy of it. If the DNA from just one of your cells were stretched into a straight line, it would measure roughly 2 meters long, yet somehow it fits into a space far too small for the human eye to see. Scientists often describe DNA as a blueprint, but that comparison doesn't quite capture its scale. A better analogy would be a library. Imagine a library containing billions of individual letters arranged in an incredibly precise order. Those letters tell your body how to grow, how to build bones, how to produce skin, how to create eyes, how to repair injuries, how to fight disease. Even tiny differences in these instructions help make every person unique. And because DNA is passed from parents to children, it also serves as a historical record, a biological archive connecting you to every generation that came before you, your parents, your grandparents, their grandparents, and thousands upon thousands of forgotten ancestors stretching back into deep time. Every person alive today is carrying an ancient family document written over hundreds of thousands of years. Most of us simply never realize it. For most of scientific history, researchers relied on physical remains to reconstruct humanity's past. Bones, teeth, stone tools, ancient campsites. These discoveries became the foundation of archaeology and paleoanthropology. Whenever a fossil was discovered, scientists carefully studied its shape, its age, its location, its surrounding environment. Bit by bit, a timeline emerged. This timeline became our map of human evolution. But there was a problem so large that it threatened the entire map. Because fossils are incredibly rare, far rarer than most people realize, when an animal dies, its remains usually disappear. Scavengers scatter the bones. Weather destroys them. Plants grow through them. Bacteria consume them. In many environments, bones can vanish completely within decades. For a skeleton to survive hundreds of thousands of years requires an astonishing combination of luck, immediate burial, stable temperatures, minimal oxygen, specific soil chemistry, the right geological conditions. Miss any one of these requirements, and the evidence disappears forever. The Earth does not remember everyone. It remembers only a tiny fraction. Now imagine a human population living in a dense tropical rainforest, generation after generation, for thousands of years. They hunt, raise families, tell stories, adapt to their environment. Then eventually they disappear, not because they never existed, but because the climate erased every physical trace they left behind. No skulls, no teeth, no fossils, nothing for a long time. Science assumed such populations would be unknowable forever. Then genetics changed everything, because even if their bones vanished, their DNA did not. Fragments of their biological identity survived by entering the genomes of future generations, and those fragments remain detectable today. Scientists call these mysterious ancestral populations ghost lineages. If you're enjoying this exploration into the mysteries hidden within our DNA, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps support the creation of in-depth documentaries like this one, and ensures you never miss the next discovery that could change how we see the world. Human groups whose bodies disappeared from history, but whose genetic signatures remain alive inside us. And once researchers learned how to search for those signatures, the ghosts began to emerge from the darkness. So how do scientists find a population when they don't have a single bone? The answer begins with a simple idea. Instead of digging through the earth, they dig through DNA. Every human genome contains roughly 3 billion genetic letters. Just 4 chemical symbols repeat over and over: T, G, and C. Those 4 letters form one of the most complex information systems in the known universe. Think of it as a massive book. Every person carries a slightly different edition. Most pages are nearly identical, but scattered throughout the text are tiny variations, small changes passed down through generations. These variations allow scientists to compare populations and reconstruct ancient relationships. The more differences to groups accumulate over time, the longer they have likely been separated. This principle forms the foundation of modern genetic ancestry research. DNA is not simply biology. It is history written in molecular language. For many years, researchers could only study DNA from living people. Ancient DNA seemed impossible. After death, genetic material begins to break apart. Heat damages it. Water destroys it. Microbes consume it. Recovering usable DNA from ancient bones appeared hopeless. Then a breakthrough occurred. Scientists developed methods capable of extracting tiny surviving fragments from exceptionally well-preserved remains. The process was painstaking. Ancient samples had to be protected from contamination. Researchers wore full-body protective equipment. Every step occurred under strict laboratory conditions. Even a single modern skin cell could compromise the analysis. Yet despite the difficulty, the results were astonishing. Scientists reconstructed the genomes of ancient human relatives, most famously Neanderthals and Denisovans. For the first time, researchers could compare living humans directly against extinct populations. The past was no longer silent. It could speak through its DNA. At first, everything seemed straightforward. Researchers compared modern humans to Neanderthal genomes. Many matches appeared, especially among populations outside Africa. This confirmed that our ancestors had interbred with Neanderthals tens of thousands of years ago. Then Denisovan matches appeared, particularly in parts of Asia and Oceania. Again, the evidence was clear. Another mystery solved, or so it seemed, because when scientists expanded their studies to include more populations around the world, strange patterns began to appear. Certain genetic fragments refused to match anything known. Not modern humans, not Neanderthals, not Denisovans. These sequences looked ancient, very ancient, yet they belonged to no population ever identified by fossils. At first, researchers suspected errors. Perhaps laboratory contamination, perhaps statistical noise, perhaps mistakes in the computer models, but the anomalies kept appearing, again and again and again, across different datasets, different laboratories, different countries. The signal would not disappear. Something unknown was hiding inside the data, something old, something that had survived 4,000 of generations without leaving a single confirmed skeleton behind. The fossil record had gone silent, but the DNA had not, and what it was revealing would force scientists to reconsider one of humanity's most fundamental assumptions. What if our family tree contains entire branches we have never seen? When most people think about human evolution, their minds immediately travel to Europe, Neanderthals, Ice Age hunters, ancient caves. But one of the most important discoveries in modern genetics did not come from Europe. It came from Africa, and in many ways, that makes perfect sense, because Africa is where the deepest roots of our species can be found. Modern humans evolved there. Many of our earliest ancestors lived there, and because populations have occupied the continent for such enormous stretches of time, Africa contains more human genetic diversity than anywhere else on Earth. If humanity's story is a library, Africa contains some of its oldest surviving books, and hidden within those books, researchers began finding something unexpected. As scientists analyzed increasingly large collections of genetic data, they noticed a recurring pattern among several West African populations. Among the groups studied were the Yoruba people of present-day Nigeria and the Mende people of Sierra Leone. When computer models compared their genomes against every known human lineage, something didn't fit. A substantial portion of their DNA appeared unusually ancient, not modern human, not Neanderthal, not Denisovan, something else. Imagine finding dozens of pages inside your family photo album that belong to a completely different family. A family nobody remembers, a family with no surviving photographs, no written records, no graves, yet somehow their pictures are mixed into your album. That was essentially the mystery facing researchers. The models suggested that between roughly 2 and 19% of genetic ancestry in some populations could trace back to an unknown archaic group. That range varies depending on the methods used. Scientists continue debating the exact numbers, but the signal itself remains difficult to ignore. Something ancient appears to have contributed DNA to later human populations. The question was simple: who were they? At this point, it is important to understand what scientists actually know and what they do not know. Researchers have not discovered a confirmed skeleton belonging to this proposed ghost population. No skull, no complete skeleton, no preserved face, no photograph from the past, obviously. So we cannot say exactly what these individuals looked like. Were they taller, shorter, more robust, more slender? Nobody knows, and good science requires honesty when evidence is incomplete. What researchers do know is that the genetic patterns suggest a population that diverged from other human lineages a very long time ago, possibly hundreds of thousands of years earlier, perhaps even approaching 1,000,000 years in some models. If true, these people would have spent immense periods of time evolving separately, developing unique adaptations, unique biology, and perhaps unique cultures that vanished without a trace. Entire generations lived and died, loved and struggled, raised children, told stories around fires, and then disappeared so completely that only their DNA remained. For decades, Many of us learn to imagine evolution as a tree, a trunk splitting into branches, each branch representing a different species, simple, orderly, easy to understand. The problem is that reality appears to be far messier. The emerging evidence suggests human evolution may have looked less like a tree and more like a network, or perhaps a river system. Rivers split apart, flow in different directions, remain separate for centuries, then merge again. Human populations may have behaved similarly. Groups became isolated, adapted to different environments, accumulated unique traits, then met again thousands of years later. And when they met, they sometimes had children together. Instead of replacing one another completely, they exchanged genes, ideas, technologies, and biological adaptations. Humanity was never a single straight line. It was a braided stream, a constantly shifting web of connections stretching across continents and across time. At this point, you might be wondering, does any of this matter? Suppose these ghost populations really existed. Suppose their DNA survives inside modern people. So what? Aren't these just ancient leftovers? Evolutionary souvenirs? Interesting, perhaps, but ultimately meaningless. The answer is no, because some inherited DNA appears to have remained for a reason. Natural selection tends to remove harmful traits over time. Genes that provide no advantage often drift into obscurity, yet certain ancient genetic variants have persisted for thousands of generations, and that suggests they may have been useful, extremely useful. To understand why, we need to examine one of evolution's most powerful mechanisms. Imagine two neighboring populations. The first encounters a dangerous disease. Most individuals have little protection. Over many generations, random mutations slowly improve resistance. Eventually, the population adapts, but adaptation takes time, sometimes thousands of years. Now imagine a second scenario. A nearby population has already solved the problem. They already possess protective genetic variants, and the two groups interbreed. Suddenly, instead of waiting thousands of years for a solution to evolve, the adaptation arrives almost immediately. Evolution has discovered a shortcut. Scientists call this process adaptive introgression. The term sounds complicated, but the idea is surprisingly simple. One population inherits useful genetic tools from another. Instead of reinventing the wheel, evolution borrows it. And in a dangerous world, borrowing can mean survival. One fascinating example involves a gene known as MUC7. This gene helps produce proteins found in saliva. Saliva may seem unremarkable, yet it represents one of the body's first lines of defense. Every day, countless microbes enter the mouth, some harmless, some potentially dangerous. Specialized proteins help trap and neutralize many of these invaders before they can establish infections. When researchers studied certain versions of the MUC7 gene, they discovered something intriguing. Some variants appeared unusually ancient. Evidence suggested they may have originated from an archaic African population that later contributed DNA to modern humans. Scientists continue investigating exactly how these variants evolved and spread, but the broader lesson is clear. Ancient interbreeding was not merely a historical curiosity. It may have shaped the biological defenses we rely upon today. This brings us to one of the strangest paradoxes in human history. Many extinct human groups appear to have been remarkably adapted to their environments. Neanderthals survived brutal ice age conditions. Denisovans contributed genes that help some modern populations function at high altitude. Other archaic populations may have carried valuable disease resistance traits. They were specialists, experts in survival, yet they disappeared. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens expanded across the globe. Why? The answer may not be that we defeated them. The answer may be that we absorbed them instead of remaining isolated. Our ancestors repeatedly encountered other human groups, and sometimes they exchanged DNA. Each encounter potentially added new biological tools to an already flexible species. The result was a population capable of adapting to an astonishing variety of environments: frozen tundra, dense rainforest, mountain plateaus, deserts, coastlines. We did not survive because we remained separate. We survived because we connected. And hidden within our DNA may be the evidence of those ancient connections. For centuries, science has tried to answer a deceptively simple question: what exactly is a human being? At first, the answer seemed straightforward. Humans were one species. Everything else was something different. Then fossils began appearing. Ancient skulls, ancient skeletons, ancient relatives. Suddenly, the picture became more complicated. Scientists discovered that humanity was never alone. At different moments in history, multiple human groups shared the planet. Some looked different, some lived differently, some adapted to environments that would challenge modern humans even today. Yet despite their differences, many of these groups were not completely isolated from one another. They interacted, they migrated, and sometimes they had children together. That single fact forces us to reconsider one of our oldest assumptions, because if different human populations exchange genes repeatedly over thousands of years, where exactly do we draw the line between us and them? Most people learn in school that species are separate groups of organisms, and often that's true. But nature rarely follows simple rules. For example, horses and donkeys can produce offspring. Lions and tigers can also produce hybrids under certain circumstances. Biology is often messier than textbooks suggest. Human evolution appears to be no exception. The more scientists study ancient DNA, the more evidence they find that our ancestors interacted with multiple human populations over vast stretches of time. The old image of perfectly separated branches is fading. In its place emerges something far more complex: a network, a web, a constantly shifting landscape of populations that sometimes separated and sometimes reunited, rather than a single family tree. Humanity may be better understood as a braided history of many interconnected groups, and if that is true, then every person alive today carries a story far more complicated than anyone imagined. The next chapter of this story may be the most extraordinary yet, because scientists are no longer satisfied with simply identifying ghost lineages. They want to know who these people were, what they looked like, how they lived, and what made them unique. Modern artificial intelligence is beginning to assist researchers in ways that would have sounded like science fiction only a generation ago. By analyzing relationships between genes and physical traits, scientists can build increasingly sophisticated models of ancient populations. To be clear, this process has important limitations. Researchers cannot magically recreate an exact face from incomplete genetic information. Many details remain uncertain. Many reconstructions involve probabilities rather than certainties. Good scientists are careful to distinguish evidence from speculation. Yet despite these limitations, The technology is advancing rapidly. Every year brings new tools, new datasets, new discoveries, and with each discovery, the silhouettes of these forgotten people become slightly clearer. For the first time in human history, we are beginning to glimpse ancestors who left behind almost nothing except traces hidden in living DNA. Think about what that means. Somewhere in the distant past, a child was born into a people whose name has been lost forever. We do not know their language. We do not know their songs. We do not know the stories they told around their fires. We do not know what they feared, what they dreamed about, or what they hoped their future would become. Their villages disappeared. Their footprints vanished. Their bones dissolved into the earth. History forgot them, or so it seemed, because while their world vanished, a small part of them continued its journey, passed from parent to child, generation after generation, across droughts, across migrations, across ice ages, across the rise and fall of civilizations. A fragment survived, and eventually that fragment reached the present day. For a very long time, we told ourselves a story about human history, a story in which one group survived and everyone else disappeared, a story of winners and losers, of replacement, of extinction. But the evidence now suggests something very different. The human story is not a lonely line marching through time. It is a mosaic, a tapestry, a living archive woven from countless forgotten lives. The people we call extinct may not be entirely gone. Their names are gone. Their faces may be gone. Their worlds are gone, yet pieces of them remain. Inside immune systems, inside metabolism, inside biological adaptations passed down through thousands of generations, and perhaps in ways we have not yet discovered, inside the very traits that make us who we are. The ghosts were never truly buried. They simply changed their address. They moved into us. So the next time you look into a mirror, remember this: you are not looking at a single survivor. You are looking at the latest chapter in a story written by many human worlds, some remembered, most forgotten, all connected. And as long as their DNA continues its journey through the living, no human lineage is ever completely lost.